If it's Friday, Vice President Harris and former President Trump hold dueling battleground rallies for a second straight day, pitching voters on two vastly different visions for the economy, as Trump defends a conspiracy theorist and repeats lies about Haitian immigrants. Plus, President Biden is expected to approve Ukraine's use of Western-made long-range missiles to strike deep inside Russian territory, in a move that President Vladimir Putin is warning will drag the U.S. and NATO directly into the war. And more than 30,000 Boeing factory workers go on strike for the first time in 16 years, as the massive aircraft manufacturer faces yet another setback. Welcome to Meet the Press Now. I'm Gabe Gutierrez in Washington on a busy day of campaigning as Vice President Kamala Harris hits battleground Pennsylvania for a rally in Wilkes-Barre, and former President Donald Trump heads to battleground Nevada for a rally in Las Vegas. It comes as both campaigns are battling each other over the most important issue for voters, the economy, while selling two very different visions in two very different ways. On the stump last night in North Carolina, Harris leaning into her so-called opportunity economy plan, while taking more than a few shots at a rival.
And my plan is to give a $50,000 tax deduction for startup businesses, because I understand not everybody, like the person that was on the stage with me the other night, gets handed $400 million on a silver platter and then files for bankruptcy 6 times. I have a plan to lower the cost of living for America's families on everything from health care to groceries, including taking on price gouging and those corporations when they take advantage of people in need.
Harris is looking to chip away at what polls show is the former president's advantage on economic issues. But as my colleague Saha Kapoor and I report, less than 2 months before Election Day, Harris's agenda has some major economic policy gaps, including question marks on paid family leave, child care, and the minimum wage. The former president, meanwhile, is going for broke on his economic agenda with ambitious and arguably unrealistic proposals. His latest pitch, a pledge to end taxes on overtime pay that was met with cheers last night by supporters in battleground Arizona.
Today, I'm also announcing that as part of our additional tax cuts, we will end all taxes on overtime. You know what that means? Think of that. If you're an overtime worker when you're past 40 hours a week, think of that. Your overtime hours will be tax-free. Okay, good.
That announcement comes without any specifics on how the exemptions on overtime would work, how much it would cost, and how it would impact the deficit. It's the latest item on a laundry list of Trump's promises to cut taxes on everything from tips to Social Security payments, and an extension of his 2017 tax cuts that come with a hefty price tag. Taken together, according to estimates, his plans would cut about $10 trillion of government revenue over the next decade if they were implemented. In an appearance at his California country club this afternoon, Trump largely steered away from policy and instead attacked Harris, complained about this week's presidential debate and its moderators, while claiming he won and refusing to commit to another face-off. He also claimed not to know about the conspiracy theories peddled by far-right activist Laura Loomer, who's been traveling on his plane with him in recent days. So, let's bring in some reporters to break this all down. Garrett Haake is following the Trump campaign in California, and he was at that press conference. And Julie Sirkin is following the Harris campaign in Pennsylvania. Thank you so much for joining me. And Garrett, I want to start with you. Trump wrapped up about an hour of remarks and questions at his golf course in California. What did you hear?
I mean, Gabe, this was a typical Trump press conference. It was kind of all over the place. The goal here, I think, was to try to go on the offense against Kamala Harris in her home state, try to hit her on border issues, on crime in the state, issues that she would have dealt with as Attorney General and as District Attorney in San Francisco. What he also ended up doing was complaining about his treatment by the moderators at ABC at the debate from last week, making fun of David Muir, the moderator of that debate, suggesting he might still debate if the mood strikes him, suggesting he would win California if the votes were counted fairly here, a state that he lost by 6 million votes in 2020. And as you pointed out with Laura Loomer, given repeated opportunities over several questions, refusing to put any distance between he and the conspiracy theorist and avowed Islamophobe, basically saying she likes me, she's spirited, and he's not familiar with the conspiracy theories and online trolling that have made her famous on the far right.
So, Garrett, Trump was very insistent yesterday that he wasn't going to debate again. You just said that he might if the mood strikes him. What more did he say about that?
This is classic Trump, Gabe.
Yeah.
Depending on how you get the question to him, you get a slightly different answer. So he made it very clear he's not interested in debating. He thinks he's the winner. He thinks this is something that will only help Harris. All things belied by the way that he's behaved afterwards. But when somebody on the rope line asked him what would get him to debate, again, he kind of shrugged it off. Oh, well, maybe if I'm in the mood. I mean, I'm a believer, Gabe, that ultimately we will probably see another debate, especially if Kamala Harris comes out and says publicly that she wants to do another one or has accepted a specific date. I don't think Trump can stay away from the debate stage, especially when you consider the pressure he would be under given his previous commitments to do 3 debates at some point in this cycle.
Yeah. So, Garrett, I want to return to what we intended to focus on today, which was economic policy. We're getting more tax cut proposals from Trump, but no details on how they'll be paid for. So is there any economic theory behind these plans, or is he just trying to give out free candy before Election Day?
It's a little bit of both, Gabe. I think if you squint hard enough at this, and what the Trump campaign will tell you and what Trump has tried to say, is he thinks the idea of tariffs, which he misrepresents as money that comes from foreign countries rather than money that will be paid by American consumers, will generate significant tax revenue, maybe enough to cover the costs of some of the programs that he's put forward. But the reality is we don't know, because often what we hear about these programs is what our viewers see. It's those 10 or 12-second sound bites. That's it. On his IVF proposal, for example, we've gotten no additional backup information from the campaign over the last 2 weeks. On the no tax on overtime, nothing from the campaign since last night. And Gabe, that's a policy where the IRS doesn't even count the difference between your regular pay and your overtime pay. There's not like there's some existing mechanism by which this could even be done. It is, I think, an opportunity for Trump to talk about policy and say he's talking about policy, but it is only so deep. And, you know, given the nature of these press conferences like the one I just covered, very difficult to peel back the onion when you just get so many onions from Trump on any given day that he wants to be talking about, aside from the things that are ostensibly the policies he's running on to be reelected as president.
Yeah, Garrett, a lot of gaps in those policies, as we said. Garrett Hake, live for us in California. Garrett, thank you. Julie, I want to turn to you. You're in Pennsylvania, where the vice president is making 2 stops on opposite ends of the state today. What is her message to voters in this crucial battleground coming off that debate?
Well, of course, this is a state, Gabe, that both former President Trump and Harris are looking to pick up. It is key to them winning the presidency and also down ballot in the Senate and House as well. You're probably going to hear the same stump speech that we've heard from her all along, contrasting her positions, her policies, who she is, and what her presidency would bring from the former presidents. But as you mentioned, she's in Pennsylvania, and not just anywhere in Pennsylvania. In under 3 hours, she's going to be here in Wilkes-Barre, which is in Lucerne County. It's a more rural part of the state. It's less friendly territory for Harris, and she just a couple of days ago, of course, released this very high-level proposal of what she plans to do for rural communities throughout the country as she hopes to peel some of that support away from former President Trump and enter it under her 10. Of course, we have yet to hear concrete specifics here, but this is a county that went about 14 points higher for former President Trump in 2020 than President Biden. She's going to talk about investing in the community. She's going to talk about child care tax credits, for example. She's going to talk about affordable housing and trying to get money back in people's pockets. I mean, I've seen shirts that people are wearing here. They say tax the wealthy. They say we want more policies that Harris could bring here. And so it's just an interesting dynamic here as she hopes to appeal to some voters that perhaps are giving her a first look for the first time.
Yeah, and Julie, yeah, those margins will be critical. The Harris campaign sees it as key, not just in a state like Pennsylvania, but also perhaps Georgia, to cut into those Republican margins in those rural areas. But I want to turn to policies we were talking about. Harris has been making a concerted effort to reach voters in the center. But as we said, her policy agenda still has a lot of gaps. You touched on this a little bit. How does the campaign plan to fill those spaces to keep moderate and independent voters interested?
Well, you know, Gabe, in my day job, of course, I cover Congress, and I was talking to Democrats on the Hill about this yesterday. They maintain that we have more to see from Harris. She's just getting going. Of course, her campaign untraditional. She only jumped in a couple of months ago, and in that debate that she had with the former president, there is still a lot that they want to see from her. Key specifics. They want to hear exactly what she's going to do with the child tax credit. They want to see exactly what she's going to continue to do on health care, for example, something I know you covered yesterday in North Carolina, Gabe, and they're saying it will come. But I think the high level here is that voters are just energized that she's taking the stage. They loved her performance during that debate on Tuesday. Of course, there are a lot of issues, not just on the economy, but also on immigration, the border, things that Republicans are still outperforming Democrats on, that she still has to outline her vision for all of these things, because as we know, at Tuesday's debate, she certainly was able to pivot and get under the former president's skin, but she has a lot to answer for when it comes to how she's going to handle certain issues. And certainly if there is a third debate that Trump is going to have, I'm assuming that's the platform and opportunity that she would use to make that case.
Julie Sirkin, live for us on the campaign trail in Pennsylvania. Julie, thank you. And at his press conference today, Donald Trump continued to demonize migrants, warning of possible mass deportations of Haitians from communities like Springfield, Ohio. It's important to note the Haitian immigrants in Springfield are in this country legally. Tensions in Springfield, of course, have escalated as Trump and his allies promote lies about Haitian immigrants. Bomb threats today forced the evacuation and closure of 2 public schools there. A city spokesperson tells NBC News that several city commissioners and a municipal employee were also the target of an emailed bomb threat. Separate threats yesterday led to the evacuation of Springfield City Hall, as well as 2 schools and another state government facility. Today, President Biden referenced his White House press secretary, Karine Jean-Pierre, as he demanded Trump stop promoting those lies.
I want to take a moment to say something like so many Americans like Karine, as he pointed out, a proud Haitian American, community that's under attack in our country right now. Simply wrong. There's no place in America. This has to stop what he's doing. It has to stop.
And joining me now on the phone is the mayor of Springfield, Ohio, Rob Rue. Mayor, thank you so much for giving us your time. I want to begin with the threats to schools in your city, which former President Trump was asked about this afternoon. Let's listen.
Mayor of Springfield, Ohio, the police chief, the Republican governor of Ohio have all debunked this story about people eating pets. And now there are bomb threats at schools and kids being evacuated. Why do you still spread this false story?
The real threat is what's happening at our border, because you have thousands of people being killed by illegal migrants coming in and also dying. You have women dying.
And Mayor, your reaction to those comments?
Well, it's obviously difficult to hear. You know, I just want to say on the onset, thank you for having me on. Springfield is a wonderful community. You know, we need help, not hate. And we need to have federal leaders that are supporting communities like ours and understand the weight of their words and what they're saying when they're on the stage like this, and how it can devastate and hurt communities like ours.
So, Mayor, help us separate fact from fiction here. I know you've been outspoken all week. I saw a press conference from you earlier in the week, and you've done some interviews. What is really going on right now in your community?
Well, because of the spread of concern with the bomb threats that we had, we're in pain right now with what's going on with those. But, I'm not going to deny it's been a difficult last 3 years as far as, we've had an influx of immigrants come into our community, which has increased our population by 20 to 25%. And that's going to put a strain on any infrastructure in any city. And within that has caused a culture clash and some difficulties that we're trying to wrap our arms around and to be responsible city leaders. And so that's some of the things that we're dealing with. Go ahead.
Oh, and Mayor, Donald Trump said today he may come to Springfield. Would you want him there?
I think that could be difficult, a very difficult visit for Springfield.
If he did come, what would you say to him?
I don't know if I'd have a chance to talk to him.
As the mayor?
That's right. So what I would say is that, like I said, we need help and not hate, and we need calm voices. We need people to understand that Springfield, we have many community citizens that care about a community, and we work collaboratively together to solve problems.
And have you reached out to the Trump and Vance campaign directly to ask them to stop peddling some of these lies?
I believe that some of our city staff members have spoken to some of Vance's staff members and to let them know that, what we're seeing in the area and the result of some of these memes and the words that have been spoken in our town. Our town.
Do you know what the response has been?
I've not heard any response back at this point. No report back about it.
So I know earlier this week, the governor there, he announced that he was sending more resources to Springfield. How much assistance from state and federal authorities have you requested, and how much of their help do you need in protecting your citizens and dealing with what's going on there?
So what Governor Mike DeWine has done, he's been very engaged throughout this process, and we have had a scheduled, coordinated effort that is in conjunction with our state police and in conjunction with our city police and our county deputies and the sheriff to have a coordinated effort with the State Highway Patrol to help us with reckless operation on our roads. When you have a culture clash, you have different driving customs, you have people that don't understand driving. It's caused some harm in our community, and so we need help in that area. This is a coordinated effort. Mike DeWine the governor did not send troops to Springfield. He actually has helped us put together a program to face these reckless operation things that we've dealt with in the town. And also he's given us $2.5 million over the next 2 years to help with our healthcare system, which is most primarily going to be going to translation services. We need to be able to communicate with the people that are here in our town. And translation services has definitely been an issue within our acute care hospital, our federally funded hospital, our school system, and our safety forces.
And Mayor, my colleague Michelle Sindor was in Springfield this week. She spoke to a member of the Haitian community about what immigrants are experiencing right now. Let's listen to some of that.
They are scared for their lives. Some of them are asking me, even yesterday I got a friend calling me asking me if he has to leave because he's scared for his life. So another friend told me that it seems that he would have had some family coming to visit him, but it seems that he gonna welcome them in Columbus or Dayton because it is not safe right now for him in Springfield.
How can you reassure these residents that they will be safe? And also, I want to get your response to Donald Trump again today, repeating the claim that those immigrants are there illegally. They're not, correct?
Under the current White House administration, these immigrants are here under a policy that is deemed legal. And so they're here, and they're not leaving anytime soon. So we need to be responsible as community leaders and put our arms around this so we can be able to communicate effectively with them. As far as a human being, I hate the fact that any other human being feels such threat as they have had to feel in our community. And it's very difficult to hear that fear resides within folks that are within our community.
Rob Rue, the mayor of Springfield, Ohio, we thank you so much for your time on what has no doubt been a very difficult week. We appreciate it, Mayor.
Thanks for having me on.
And coming up, President Biden is set to meet with the British Prime Minister minutes from now as Washington weighs allowing Ukraine to launch Western weapons deep into Russia. Plus, a rare glimpse inside Gaza. NBC's Richard Engel reports from the devastated streets of Rafah straight ahead. You're watching Meet the Press Now. Welcome back. In just a few minutes, President Biden is set to host UK Prime Minister Keir Starmer at the White House, where the two leaders are expected to discuss a range of issues, including whether the U.S. and UK will loosen restrictions on Ukraine's use of long-range missiles to strike deeper inside Russia. But ahead of any potential announcement, Russian President Putin issued a warning of his own, saying that lifting restrictions on these long-range weapons would make NATO a direct participant in the war against Russia. Separately, Russia also announcing today it was expelling 6 British diplomats from Moscow, accusing them of spying. The UK says the accusations are completely baseless. And joining me now is my White House colleague, Monica Alba. Monica, let's get right to it. Do we know what kind of conversations are happening within the Biden administration right now about these long-range missiles?
Yeah, we do, Gabe, and we know that this has been an ongoing conversation, and these discussions really have been happening at the highest levels of the U.S. government for a while, because remember that for the beginning part of this war, there were restrictions on even using ATACMS, these longer-range missiles, and the president and his top aides for a long time said that they weren't going to be sending those to Ukraine, even though President Zelensky had been asking for them. That eventually shifted, but there were some parameters under which they could be used in terms of where geographically and closer to the border between Ukraine and Russia they could go. Now President Zelensky has been asking for a long time for the ability to go deeper into Russian territory with some of these long-range missiles. And so one possible avenue here that could be pursued would be to use the Storm Shadow missiles, which is a UK program, but that uses some U.S. parts in order to achieve that goal. So that is something I'm told they will definitely be discussing today as these two leaders are about to sit down together in the Blue Room for a meeting to talk about this among a range of topics. And the question will be, is President Biden going to sign off on something like that? And then will the UK go forward along with the French in terms of providing those weapons to Ukraine? Or could there be another change in U.S. policy, which at least today, senior administration officials say they don't anticipate that could change down the line, as we have seen before. So we know that they're at least evaluating this as they try to discuss and really figure out a way to continue to support Ukraine, which is the U.S. goal here, and which is something the president's been very public about. But obviously, we've seen sort of the goalposts move on what's allowed and what's not as this war has progressed.
And Monica, Secretary Blinken also announced new actions against RT. The U.S. announced charges against 2 of the network's employees just last week. So what was announced today?
Yeah, and this is a significant conversation that's also going on when we talk about potential election interference. And certainly when we're talking about these charges today, this is examining and evaluating things that have happened in the past. But Secretary Blinken had a bigger warning about what this could mean when it comes to really amplifying and spreading misinformation that can really reach American voters and can affect the way that they make up their minds. So this is something that's being put in the context of here's what we know already took place in the past. Here's what we are really saying is unacceptable. And here are the fears of what could happen again down the line as we get closer to this election. So this is something that you've really seen from the Department of Justice, the White House, and now the State Department in terms of an all-out administration effort to highlight this issue. Gabe.
Monica Alba at the White House for us. Monica, thank you. And let me now bring in Bill Taylor, former U.S. ambassador to Ukraine and vice president for Europe and Russia at the U.S. Institute of Peace. He joins us now from Kyiv. Ambassador, thank you very much for joining us. I want to get right to it. What are you hearing from officials about the possibility that President Biden and the UK Prime Minister may announce the easing of restrictions on those long-range missiles?
Gabe, just as you've reported, just as Monica reported, the Ukrainians are hearing the same thing. The Ukrainians are very interested in removing these restrictions. They've argued and continue to argue today that this is not a major change. The United States has already allowed the Ukrainians to use the U.S.-provided weapons into Russia. This is not a change. The distance is the change. And the Ukrainians are very eager to hear the outcome of this discussion in Washington. They are very eager to get the approval to use the long-range U.S. weapons, as well as the British and the French, to go after targets in Russia that are shooting at them. These are military targets in Russia that are firing at Ukrainian positions and Ukrainian cities, Ukrainian civilian infrastructure, and the Ukrainians want to be able to fire back and stop that firing.
And Ambassador, what are you seeing on the ground in Kyiv right now? How's morale among Ukrainians right now?
Gabe, I've been here 8 times since the big war, and it varies a lot depending on what's going on the battlefield. And right now, the Ukrainians are on the front foot. The Ukrainians have taken the initiative, as you've reported, in Kursk, and they have pushed into Russian territory, thus denying the Russians the ability to shoot as much at targets inside Ukraine. So this has given the Ukrainian people, the Ukrainian military, a morale boost. It has also affected supporters. The Americans, the Europeans are pleased to see, and you can feel that here, pleased to see that the Ukrainians have the initiative, are taking the fight to the Russians, and are having success.
Now, President Zelensky has said that he will present President Biden with a victory plan when they meet sometime this month. Do we know what that plan looks like? Is it purely military strategy, or does it open the door for some type of diplomacy with Russia?
It will have several components, and President Zelensky has said that he's made a commitment to President Biden not to discuss it in any detail before he presents it to President Biden and Vice President Harris and potentially even Donald Trump. But he is definitely going to talk to President Biden first before he gives any details. But to your question, it's more than military. It will certainly have a military component, and probably these long-range fires that you and I just discussed will be part of that. There'll be other military pieces of the plan, of the victory plan, but there will be economic. There will be an emphasis on making sanctions work better. There will be an emphasis on what a peace looks like, and President Zelensky has been very clear in describing what a peace would look like after the Russians leave the country. So it's going to be multifaceted, and he, again, wants to talk to the president first.
And there was also a major cabinet shakeup in Ukraine. What can you tell us about who's advising President Zelensky right now, and if we should expect to see a shift in strategy when it comes to the war?
I would not expect to see a shift in strategy based on the shuffle, which is what the Ukrainians are calling it here in the cabinet, as you say. Some jobs were merged. Some ministers were moved from one ministry to another. One minister was moved from a ministry into the president's office. There was a change in the foreign minister. And I would imagine that the policy will continue pretty much as it has been. That said, there is this victory plan that has been in preparation for some time, but it is not at all, the details of which are just not clear. But the victory plan, I think, will form the basis of their policy going forward.
Ambassador Bill Taylor, thank you so much for your time and your expertise. We really appreciate it.
Thank you, Gabe.
And turning now to the Middle East, where the UN says more than 560,000 children have now received their first dose of the polio vaccine after health officials in Gaza confirmed their first case in a 10-month-old boy. It was a massive undertaking by the World Health Organization that required multiple 3-day ceasefires, providing temporary relief in fighting for the people of Gaza. But it comes as a long-term ceasefire and an end to the hostilities in Gaza remains out of reach. NBC News chief foreign correspondent Richard Engel was on the ground in the Gaza Strip and got a first-hand look at the destruction left behind in Rafah.
This is what's left of Rafah in the Gaza Strip. Every street, everywhere you turn the camera, you will just see more and more destruction. We'll walk down this street a little bit, not too far, because you can probably hear the Israeli drone above. The Israeli military says that it has defeated Hamas's infrastructure here, and that is why I am able to be here right now. The Israeli army brought in a group of journalists. We're part of a press tour, a rare press tour that the Israeli military is allowing into Rafah. It is the only way that foreign journalists are able to get into the Gaza Strip because the entire Gaza Strip is sealed off. And it is just unimaginable how Palestinians are going to be able to live here at the end of this war. But it is unclear when this war is going to end. The Israeli military brought us here for a bit of a victory tour. They say that they have been able to defeat Hamas with tremendous force, with a lot of fighting. They were able to break the back of the Rafah battalion, and that there are still some fighters perhaps here and there, but that the military infrastructure, at least in this area of Hamas, has been destroyed. But it doesn't mean that Israeli troops are leaving for now. Israel wants to maintain a military presence in Rafah along the Egyptian border and wants to keep this area for perhaps perpetuity. And you can hear some of the gunfire that is still going on. So it is still an active combat zone, even though the Israelis claim that they have broken the back of Hamas here. But the larger question is, okay, what comes next? Will they occupy this forever? Will there be an ongoing military presence? Will the Israelis control, which Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu wants to do, the entire border between Rafah and Egypt? Or will there be some sort of day after in which the Israeli military hands over control to the Palestinians? Perhaps not Hamas, but somebody else. And all of these are open questions. So even though now we're in the midst of this devastation and ongoing small battles, the Israelis are trying to show progress, trying to show success, trying to show that their operations here have achieved something. But they're also raising tremendous questions about the future of this place and how anyone possibly could live here, how anyone could grow up here, and what kind of future the people of Gaza can expect.
And we thank Richard Engel and his team for that reporting, a rare look inside Rafah. And up next, what's next for Boeing as more than 30,000 factory workers walk off the job? A major blow for the troubled manufacturer after a series of high-profile safety incidents and failures. You're watching Meet the Press now. Welcome back. Right now, more than 30,000 Boeing workers are on strike, bringing production of one of its most popular planes to a halt. The union rejected the company's latest labor offer late yesterday. 96% of workers approved the strike, which began at midnight. This is the first Boeing strike since 2008. That stoppage lasted 8 weeks. And it comes in the midst of a tumultuous year for the aerospace giant. It's faced several investigations after a door plug blew out midair in January. It agreed to plead guilty to criminal fraud charges in July in connection to 2 deadly crashes. And problems with Boeing's Starliner have left 2 astronauts stranded on the International Space Station for 3 months. Phil LeBeau covers the auto and airline industries for CNBC, and he joins me now. Phil, it's good to see you. What are the Boeing workers' demands?
The biggest one, Gabe, is that they want 40% pay increase over the next 4 years. The agreement that was rejected was 25% over the next 4 years. And when I've talked with the striking workers, almost all of them say the same thing. 25% over 4 years sounds like a good deal. But if you go back and look at the previous contracts, specifically the previous one from 2016 through 2024, they only got a 4% raise over 8 years. And they believe that they're just behind the 8 ball in terms of keeping up with inflation. So as a result, the primary issue, and there are some other issues, a pension, some of the health care benefits, but the primary issue involves the pay. They want 40%. The agreement that they rejected called for 25%.
And Phil, how much could this strike cost a company?
Well, it costs them every day they can't deliver an aircraft, and that's going to be happening almost immediately. Look, every time a 737 MAX, which is built in the facility behind me, every time one is delivered to a customer, it's about $10 million in free cash flow to the company. That's $10 million every day that the company won't be collecting. Not surprisingly, today we heard from Fitch and Moody's, both of them warning of a possible downgrade in the credit rating for Boeing. And being investment grade is critical to the company, especially if it has to borrow more money in the future. So this is going to have a financial hit on Boeing, especially if this lasts over an extended period of time. By that, I mean beyond 2 weeks, 3 weeks, 4 weeks.
And to that point, Phil, Boeing's last strike lasted more than 8 weeks. Is this stoppage expected to last as long?
Yeah. Well, the history between the machinist and Boeing is not one that shows a lot of progress when it comes to negotiations. Once a strike starts, they tend to last anywhere between 40 and 60 days. Now, admittedly, you're looking at 4 strikes over the last 34 years, and people would say, well, those are isolated and unique circumstances with each of those strikes. But I have to tell you, Gabe, when you have 96% of the workforce, the unionized workforce, rejecting a contract and saying, I'm ready to walk the picket line, that it's going to take a while for management and the union to come together on an agreement.
Phil LeBeau with CNBC. Phil, thank you so much. And after the break, new developments in the battle over abortion access and the escalating fallout as former President Trump pushes a baseless migrant conspiracy theory. The panel is next. You're watching Meet the Press Now. And welcome back. As former President Trump says he won't commit to another debate against Vice President Harris, he continues to claim victory in Tuesday's showdown. But the polls don't quite agree with him about that. According to a new Reuters Ipsos poll, voters say Harris won the showdown. She appeared more dignified, and she gave voters more hope for the future. And Trump stumbled and didn't appear sharp. That being said, a majority of voters do agree with Trump that one debate between the presidential candidates was enough. And for more, I'm joined now by the panel. Jasmine Wright, reporter for Notice. Eugene Robinson, Washington Post columnist and NBC News political analyst. And Lance Trover, Republican strategist and former spokesman for Doug Burgum's presidential campaign. Thank you all so much for joining me here. And Jasmine, I want to start with you. Look, Trump says he's done. No more debates. But knowing what we know about Donald Trump, what's the likelihood he sticks to that?
I mean, I could see it going back and forth a couple more times until that 25th date. But the reality is I was in North Carolina with the vice president yesterday, both of her rallies, and she was very clear. One of her aides told me that after Trump made that Truth Social post saying no more debates, or there will be no more debates in all caps, they were very quick to put language in her speech talking about the fact that she felt like they owed it to the American people to have a second debate. So the Harris campaign is really doubling down on trying to get them to come or get Trump to a yes. Whether or not that happens, I don't think that they even know.
Yeah, adding that pretty much to almost the beginning of her stump speech. And Tim Walz yesterday was goading the Trump campaign about that. Do you think that that will eventually get under Trump's skin if they keep hammering this message over the next few weeks? I mean, he's essentially chicken. I mean, that's essentially what they're arguing.
I think that one thing was clear from the debate, which is that goading kind of works on the former president. So I think that they're going to try at least to continue to attack him, bring him up. We saw her say it again today. I think that she'll say it over the next week in all of her events because they feel like they want another debate. They feel like it'll be a good thing for the vice president. Obviously, she raised $47 million in the first 24 hours after that first debate, so why not?
And Eugene, I want to ask that question. Does Harris need the debate or want the debate more than Trump? Is it a way for her to keep defining herself?
Why wouldn't she want it? Because she raised $47 million and she had a good time, right? She had a really good time. She pushed every button.
What if she has a bad time in the next debate?
Well, I guess that's possible, but you know, if everything is true to form, it didn't look likely that this was going to reverse itself. And in fact, why would Donald Trump want to put himself through that again? And why would his campaign want him to put?
I could argue that he would want to do it again. I mean, his base is locked in support, I mean, of one thing, so he's not really going to lose anybody in terms of that. I mean, it's a possibility. There is still an opportunity to define her with the public out there. And so I think if the campaign thinks and they think that he could go through and do what he didn't do the other night, then I think there's a possibility that it could. I think of Rocky Balboa when he says, ain't nothing over till it's over. That's kind of here with Donald Trump. I mean,
there's a redemption arc. There's a redemption arc that's possible, of course, because one thing that the Trump campaign signaled is that they wanted him to over and over and over again ask, you have all of these plans, well, why haven't you done them in office? And obviously he wasn't able to do that until the last answer. So that's kind of what they would want to do if Trump were to say yes to a second one.
But Harris would immediately say crowd size, right? And it would be over. I mean, come on, you guys know.
Well,
it would be over.
I want to turn now to, look, this week Trump had Laura Loomer, far-right conspiracy theorist who has at times said that 9/11 is an inside job. She was with him on the plane, went to 9/11 ceremonies. This afternoon, the former president was asked about her role in his campaign. I want to play some of that sound.
Laura is a supporter. I don't control Laura. Laura has to say what she wants. She's a free spirit. Well, I don't know. I mean, look, I can't tell Laura what to do. Laura's a supporter. She is a strong person. She's got strong opinions, and I don't know what she said, but that's not up to me. She's a supporter.
Lance, a free spirit?
That's one way of putting it.
How can Trump continue to have her on his plane, given some of the stuff? When Marjorie Taylor Greene is, this week she came out against Laura Loomer. What does that do to his campaign, or does it fan the flames, in a positive way as the campaign sees it? Does it, rile up his base?
I would say that number one, I mean, I certainly don't agree with 9/10 of what she says out there. I think if you look at Donald Trump's history, he has always had a cast of characters that are around him and that support him, that are many questionable people that have said anti-Semitic things and the like. Does it really resonate with voters at the end of the day? I don't know that it really does. It certainly doesn't, obviously, with his base, and his base likes some of that stuff. But I would argue, I mean, some of those, they're abhorrent, some of the things that she has said, particularly about 9/11, which I find to be very, very troubling. I would find, sticking around folks like that as you go into the final 8 weeks of this race are really just a distraction for him, and I wouldn't advise it.
Does he, Jasmine, perhaps does he want a distraction? That way he doesn't have to get too deeply into policy?
I mean, I think one thing that has been clear since the vice president topped the ticket is that he had been trying to claw back that media focus. Obviously, over the last 10 months, what we've seen is him really dominate the media conversation day to day, week out, not Biden. And then once Harris came on the ticket, that kind of flipped. And so I think that this is potentially another way to regain some of that media spotlight. But I think this has been a constant conversation around the former president. Folks within the Republican Party questioning who is around him, who is advising him, and who is giving him advice. That applies to the debate, and it certainly applies to Loomer flying on the plane.
But it is possible to go too far, though. I mean, it really is. Laura Loomer is beyond the pale. She is from the furthest fringe of, I don't even know if you could call it our politics anymore. It's just a fringe.
And to that point, I was going to bring up the baseless conspiracy theories out of Springfield, Ohio, that former President Trump and his allies have been amplifying this week. Why continue to amplify this? Do you think there is some sort of benefit?
I guess. I mean, he thinks there's a benefit, clearly, because he keeps doing it, and J.D. Vance keeps doing it, and I think they believe it sort of riles up anti-immigration sentiment, and that's good for him. It's a serious thing, though. I mean, there are Haitian migrants who live in Springfield who kept their kids home from school today because of threats. There was a bomb threat yesterday that was specifically sort of whoever sent in the threat cited Haitian immigration. And, somebody's going to get hurt. Or somebody could get hurt.
I think the issue here is what it's speaking to is this issue of immigration, and they want to keep talking about it, right? And this town has experienced an explosion in Haitian. I mean, I grew up in a town of 1,400 people. If 500 people just moved in over the course of a year or two, that would be a big deal. I mean, talking 15,000 people who moved in over the course of just a couple of years. It has been a complete change in that city. I think the issue here, the reason they're keeping it alive, is the immigration issue. Now, is talking about dogs and cats being eaten, which obviously is not true, or at least it's not been proven to this point, the way to do it. No, I would argue that's not the best route.
And that's to that point. Immigration might be a legitimate issue. There are cities across the country, including New York, Chicago, other big cities that have seen their resources strained by a large influx of immigrants. In this particular case, though, these Haitian immigrants are there legally. The former president today called them illegal. That is incorrect. Why not focus on a more, on a legitimate immigration debate, as Republicans see it, rather than go that extra step to talk about eating pets?
No argument with me on the eating the pets front. Again, I think this is to the larger issue of immigration and how they're doing it. It is it is the one issue that he hammered, I would say, the best at the debate the other night, and it is the one issue that affects a lot of people. It pulls off the charts in this country, and I think that's the reason they're doing it.
But I also think it's just giving red meat to his base, right? Like, it's giving red meat to his base, riling them up, anti-immigration sentiment. Today in that press conference, he said he would start his mass deportations in Springfield, Ohio. Again, a legal community of Haitian migrants. And so I think it's just red meat trying to rev up his base ahead of the November election.
All right. Jasmine, Eugene, Lance, thank you so much for joining us here on the panel. Always good to have you here. And still to come, the odds are increasingly in Republicans' favor to take back control of the Senate. One of the best election forecasters in the business joins us next. You're watching Meet the Press Now. Stay with us. Welcome back. Turning now to the battle for the Senate and a major shift from our friends at the Cook Political Report. In Montana's Senate race, where incumbent Democrat Jon Tester is up against Republican Tim Sheehy, Cook is moving their rating from toss-up to lean Republican. It means Republicans are now increasingly favored to win the Senate, winning Montana, along with a likely Republican flip of retiring Senator Joe Manchin's Senate seat in West Virginia. Would be enough for Republicans to win Senate control, unless Democrats can pull off a major upset somewhere else. And joining me now is Jessica Taylor, Senate and Governor's editor at the Cook Political Report. Jessica, thanks so much for joining us. Let's start with your new move. Why is Montana now leaning Republican? What caused that move?
We've seen successive polls, both public and private, where Tester's Republican opponent, former Navy SEAL Tim Sheehy, is leading. Now it's very close, and I think some of the internal polls are closer than some of the public polls. They've shown anywhere between a 6 to 8 point lead. But when you were an incumbent at this point in the cycle and you were trailing, and I think also crucially, Jon Tester's approval ratings are now underwater in a lot of polling that I've seen. And when we look back where he was elected in 2006, defeated a Republican, he won in 2012, even as President Obama was winning the state, and then in 2018, which was a very favorable midterm year. But Republicans really struggled to sort of get him underwater in those races, and so they feel like they've sort of really cracked this code. Tim Sheehy has been running positive ads about his military background, trying to portray himself as Montana enough, emphasizing that his kids were born there. Now Jon Tester is still emphasizing where he breaks with his party, and they've targeted Sheehy for comments that he's made, his business investments and different things. So Democrats still feel like they have enough to prosecute. We're not saying that Jon Tester is completely out of this. He's been a political survivor. But as we look at the race right now, you have to consider that Tester is the underdog, and that's a really significant shift when we look back at his other races.
And Jessica, Montana is leaning Republican, but not Ohio. So why is Sherrod Brown in better shape than Jon Tester?
Well, when you look at just the sheer numbers, this is a state where Montana, Trump won by 16 points, and Ohio, Trump won by 8 points twice. And again, I go back to, I think it looks at the candidate quality that Republicans have running there. Tim Sheehy has spent more on air by himself and has really tried to portray himself positively, telling the story of who he is as a veteran, as an owner of an aerial firefighting company. Now, he didn't have a primary in the Ohio race with Sherrod Brown. There was a competitive primary where a lot of negative ads were spent. Bernie Moreno, a former luxury car dealer, emerged from that primary, but Moreno was largely dark over the summer. And I've talked with a lot of Republicans that feel like that was a misstep, that he should have been airing positive ads in the same way that Sheehy was, to sort of give voters a reason to vote for him. So we have seen polls, again, very close, but Brown is still winning there. Even as Trump was winning by 10 points in some of those polls. Going back to 2012 race with Tester, he was able to outrun Obama by 7 points, but double digits just becomes hard. And I think Ohio is going to be a much closer race at the presidential level, even though Trump is going to win it. So I think it's less of a lift for Brown to outrun Harris by. So I think just the political gravity is smaller in Ohio than it is in Montana.
So without Montana, do Democrats have any path to a majority in the Senate?
It's incredibly slim. That means that they have to find another seat to flip. And the most likely candidates are Texas or Florida, with Ted Cruz in Texas and Rick Scott in Florida. I think Texas, when I'm talking sources, is slightly more probable. You have Colin Allred, a congressman there from the Dallas area, who's been raising a lot of money. But again, both of those states are going to go red at the presidential level. So, we rate both of those as likely Republican at this juncture, but you could see Democrats. I don't think they're going to pull the money from Jon Tester at this point, but you could see investments coming from them if they need to go in on another state. Florida, I think Democrats are intrigued by, because there is a ballot amendment for abortion on the ballot they feel like could juice turnout there as well.
But to that point, to the cash point, is Florida an uphill climb, though, for Democrats because of that reason? Rick Scott's personal wealth might might be tough. It means they can't catch up on spending. Might that have something to do with it?
Yeah, that's why I think Texas at this point is a probably a better bet for them, just because both states are incredibly expensive with multiple media markets. But Allred has proved to be a better fundraiser than Debbie Moore Purcell Powell has in Florida. And as you mentioned, Rick Scott can open up his checkbook at any point. Versus, Ted Cruz has had strong fundraising certainly and is taking the race seriously, but he's not a self-funder in the same way that Rick Scott is.
Jessica Taylor from the Cook Political Report. Thank you so much for your time.
Thank you.
And thank you for watching. I'm Gabe Gutierrez, and we're back Monday with more Meet the Press Now. And if it's Sunday, it's Meet the Press on your local NBC News station. Kristen will have an exclusive interview with Secretary Pete Buttigieg, plus an interview with Trump's running mate, Senator J.D. Vance. The news continues with Tom Costello in for Hallie Jackson right now.
Thanks for watching. Stay updated about breaking news and top stories on the NBC News app or follow us on social media.